Welcome back to The Explainer. We love taking these massive, complex concepts and breaking them down into clear, structured insights that you can actually use. Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we're tackling a seriously powerful, overarching theme, freedom. But look, we aren't just going to leave it floating around in the realm of lofty, abstract philosophy. Our goal today is to translate this big idea into real-world practice and explore exactly what it means for our daily lives and how our societies actually function. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the ideal of freedom, then figure out what exactly freedom is. After that, we'll look at why we actually need constraints, dive into the harm principle, explore negative versus positive liberty, and finally, wrap things up with freedom of expression.
So let's kick things off with Section 1, the ideal of freedom.
To truly grasp the weight of this concept, we really have to start by looking at the immense human cost of freedom. Throughout history, people have been dominated, enslaved, exploited. But right alongside that, we see these incredibly inspiring struggles against that domination. To understand this deeply, just look at Nelson Mandela's long walk to freedom. He fought against the deeply unjust constraints of the apartheid regime in South Africa, a system that literally dictated where people could go or even who they could marry based entirely on race. For this cause, Mandela spent 27 years of his life in jail, often in solitary confinement. Really think about the specific sacrifices that entails. Giving up your youth, giving up the simple joy of chatting with friends, wearing your favorite clothes, listening to your favorite music. He even gave up playing his favorite sport. Mandela absolutely loved boxing. He sacrificed the whole shebang to fight for the freedom of all people in South Africa. And we see a very similar thread in Aung San Suu Kyi's struggle in Myanmar. Deeply inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's thoughts on nonviolence, she spent years under house arrest. Her sacrifices were agonizingly personal. She was separated from her children. She couldn't even visit her husband when he was dying of cancer in England because she knew if she left, she'd never be allowed to return to her people. As her quote points out, she equated real freedom with freedom from fear. The fear of authority, the fear of community reaction, the fear of ridicule. Overcoming that fear is what ultimately allows for a dignified human life. Seeing these monumental, life-altering sacrifices forces us to pause and ask a pretty fundamental question. What exactly is this freedom that people are willing to give up their youth, their families, and quite literally their lives for? That brings us to Section 2. What exactly is freedom? Let's shift gears from historical inspiration to a clear working definition. A fantastic way to understand this is through the concept of Swaraj from Indian political thought. The word combines swa, meaning self, and raj, meaning rule. But as Mahatma Gandhi highlighted way back in his 1909 work Hind Swaraj, it goes far beyond just getting rid of colonial rulers or snapping external chains. It actually means learning to rule ourselves. Swaraj is about redeeming our self-respect, developing self-responsibility, and truly understanding ourselves in relation to our communities. It's essentially liberation from dehumanization. So the crucial point is that freedom actually has two dimensions. It's kind of like a coin. The first side is the absence of external constraints, meaning you aren't coerced or controlled by outside forces, and you can make independent decisions. But the second dimension is just as critical. It's the expanding ability for people to freely express themselves and develop their potential. A truly free society has to provide the positive conditions for people to develop their creativity and talents, whether that's in sports, science, or art, with the absolute minimum of social constraints holding them back. Moving right along to Section 3, why we need constraints. Now, this brings us to what might seem like a total paradox. To be truly free, we actually need rules and constraints. Now, what's really interesting about this image is how perfectly it captures that restrictive, squirmy feeling of societal rules. We all experience this, right? Nobody really likes being told what to do or having limits placed on their actions. It feels totally counterintuitive to our baseline desire for complete liberty. But here is the blunt truth we just have to accept. We absolutely cannot live in a world where there are no constraints whatsoever. Without any rules, society would simply descend into total chaos. Think about it. We all have different ideas, conflicting ambitions, and we're all constantly competing for scarce resources. Let's ground this abstract philosophy in reality for a second. Think about the everyday conflicts you see around you. Road rage while driving. We've all been tempted to just lay on the horn, right? Or what about bitter fights over a prime parking space at the grocery store? Quarrels over housing or land, or even really aggressive disagreements over whether a particular film should be allowed to be screened. Any of these can escalate into violence. And because of that, every single society absolutely needs mechanisms and constraints to control violence, settle disputes, and ensure that one group doesn't coercively impose its views on everybody else. Section 4. The harm principle. Okay, so if we agree we need constraints, the million-dollar question becomes which constraints are actually justified and which are just plain oppressive. This is where a brilliant concept from the political theorist John Stuart Mill comes into play. Mill introduced what's known as the harm principle in his essay on liberty. He made an absolutely crucial distinction between two types of actions. First, you've got self-regarding actions. These are actions that have consequences only for the individual actor. Essentially, that's my business, I'll do what I like. Mill argued that the state or any external authority has absolutely zero business interfering here. But then there are other regarding actions. These are actions that have consequences for others, potentially causing them real harm. In these cases, there is a totally legitimate case for external interference to protect people. But Mill actually goes a step further and categorizes the severity of the harm. If an action causes minor harm, he argues it only warrants social disapproval, not the heavy hand of the law. Think of someone playing loud music in an apartment building. It's highly annoying, and it certainly harms your ability to sleep, but the solution there is social disapproval. Maybe you refuse to greet that neighbor in the hallway. You don't call the police. However, if an action causes serious harm, like putting people in actual physical danger or fomenting violent hatred against a group, well, that is when legal constraints and punishments are entirely justified. Section 5, Negative and Positive Liberty. Let's move to and see how this builds into the dual nature of liberty in political theory. These two dimensions are known as negative and positive liberty. Negative liberty is all about freedom from. It asks the question, over what area am I the master? It seeks to define an inviolable area of non-interference where you can do, be, or become whatever you want without any external authority stepping in and stopping you. Positive liberty, on the flip side, is about freedom too. It asks, who governs me? And the ideal answer is, I govern myself. This focuses heavily on the enabling conditions of society. It's not enough to just leave someone alone. They have to have the positive conditions, like adequate material resources, an end to crushing poverty, and access to education to actually develop their minds and capabilities. It's like a flower blossoming. It needs fertile soil, not just an empty field. And finally, Section 6, Freedom of Expression. We are now going to put all of these philosophical ideals to the ultimate real-world stress test. And this brilliantly illustrates the idea of looking past the curtain of censorship. You see, freedom of expression fundamentally belongs to that minimum area of non-interference we just talked about with negative liberty. It is a core requirement for a free society, which means society must be willing to bear some level of inconvenience to protect it from those who want to restrict it. But man, this is incredibly difficult in practice. Just look at this list from our source material. Deepa Mehta's film about widows in Varanasi faced such intense protests that it couldn't even be filmed there. Books like Aubrey Menon's Ramayana Retold and Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses, the film The Last Temptation of Christ, and the play Manathram Dolte were all banned after protests from various sections of society. Banning is very often used as an easy short-term solution to appease immediate public anger, but it profoundly harms the long-term prospects of a free, open society that actually values expression. This brings us to a foundational quote, summarizing the core commitment required for true freedom of expression. It's often attributed to the philosopher Voltaire. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it. This is the ultimate test, isn't it? It's so easy to defend the freedom of people who already agree with you. The real challenge is protecting that minimum area of non-interference for views you find deeply inconvenient or even personally objectionable, provided they don't cross that line into serious harm. Which leaves us with this final thought for today's explainer. I want you to look at the constraints in your own society. Look at the things you approve and disapprove of, and ask yourself honestly, how deeply are you really committed to freedom of expression? Do you support the rules of your society because they protect the development of everyone's potential, or just because they happen to align with your own views? It's a really challenging question, but grappling with it is the only way we learn to truly rule ourselves. Thank you so much for joining me, Focus Learners. Keep questioning everything, and I'll see you in the next explainer.